Thanks so much. This is episode 10 of the Lead Gen Underground Live. Today with my buddy and sales expert, Greg Helbeck. Glad to have you here, buddy.
Hello, hello. I'm glad to be here.
So talk about, just for real briefly, we're going to dive into gold nuggets and stuff right away, but talk briefly about your markets, what you do, that kind of thing, if nobody knows, which they should already.
Yep. So originally started over on the East Coast in New York, and I got my footing in that area, and then eventually started kind of getting into the virtual wholesale game a couple of years ago, and went into Texas for a while. I was doing a lot of deals over there, and now I live in California, so I do virtual deals in New York and in I guess I do virtual deals in California because I'm closing on some deals out here, and I've never seen them. And recently, as of the last couple months, because of tools like PropStream, I've been really able to just pull lists throughout the entire country and test certain markets in the country to see if I get a better response on direct mail and stuff. So I've been testing a lot of stuff in the Midwest to see how that compares to my responses in New York and California and stuff. So testing some markets in Iowa, some small ass markets, and the results are pretty interesting, as well as Pennsylvania, some really small cities that people really aren't thinking about, getting phenomenal results from a conversion standpoint. So definitely in testing mode now, but nonetheless been doing a lot of wholesaling, and really before this coronavirus, most of it was rehabbing and wholetailing. And I think now with the uncertainty, I still think the market is pretty strong, at least where I'm doing business. But over the next couple months, it could get interesting with a lot of the hard money drying up, and some of the regulations, at least in New York, where real estate agents can't go out and show houses for a while. So it's kind of screwing everyone up. Unfortunately, I sold a ton of properties, and I'm pretty liquid now. And a couple months ago, that wasn't the case. I would have been in real trouble if this happened, in the beginning of the year.
Yeah, well, good news for you. That's awesome. Guys, I had Greg on today because he's an absolute sales expert. I met him actually at the John Martinez training, really one of the pivotal days in my career, where my career absolutely changed just from paying for John and Greg's knowledge at that time. And that's how I really I met Greg there for the first time, and then just followed him online, and we become friends, and we're both in Investor Fuel. And so that's why I have him on today. Specifically because now everyone is kind of forced to adapt to the virtual wholesale model. I'm really interested to see how he has taken that traditional belly-to-belly sales model and now converted it to being mostly virtual, and now forced 100% virtual, I guess, over the phone.
Yeah,
I've done it myself, but I wanted to, pick your brain a little bit, a bit.
Totally, man. Yeah, and that's something that you kind of get the best of both worlds. If I'm on the East Coast, I'll go on appointments myself, but if I'm in California, I usually do it all over the phone. So yeah, for the virtual stuff, I have a lot of experience, so I'd be happy to really help anyone I can on this training call. So yeah, really love talking about that topic, buying over the phone.
That's awesome, man. So talk about a little bit about how you start your day. I know you're an avid time blocker, which is the method that I follow, but I would consider you to be a lot better than I am with it, at least from what you've shown online. Talk about that and how it benefits your day and stuff.
Yeah, man. So that stuff I had to really figure out because, I was never that really organized, and I would just go around. And I would feel like, Josh, I'd feel like I was so busy all day, and oh yeah, I'm hustling, whatever that means. And I really wasn't getting anything done. I had no strategy for my day, and I just kind of piss time away. So in terms of time blocking, what I really try to do is I try to set my most important work up in 3 to 4 blocks that get distributed throughout the entire day, usually from 5:30 in the morning to 4:30 p.m. Because by 4:30 p.m., man, I'm fried. I need to go work out and hang out with my girlfriend and chill out because business is over for me. That's why I start early. So really what I do, and in those time blocks, they're anywhere from usually 60 to 90 minutes at a time, right? Because I want to get a lot of concentration in those time blocks. And all those time blocks, the key here is they're all kind of built around revenue generating activities that I can control that are getting me towards my goals. So I'm not going to go into a time block. Let's say an example would be spend 30 minutes, trying to sell a property in a market I've never even been to before. So if I spend that 30 minutes in that block, right, trying to get a buyer for a property in Pennsylvania, for example, I know that activity eventually will lead me to making money, which will lead towards my goal of making a certain income, per year. So it all has to do with a goal that I want to achieve. And it doesn't have to just be for real estate. Obviously, this is a real estate training call here, but for like some internet marketing stuff I'm doing, same deal. Work on writing copy for 30 minutes for something I want to launch on a Facebook ad, right? So the key there is it helps you set your day up to where, you have your strategic time structured, right? To where everything you're doing there is going to get you to your goals, hopefully. But in between those time blocks, you can take time to like go for a walk or go to lunch with your kids or, take a bunch of phone calls that you might not want to take, but you're preventing yourself from getting interrupted from like having your phone next to you and then trying to get a project done. And then the phone rings and you're like, oh, I picked it up. And now all of a sudden you just burned 20 minutes. So it allows you to kind of be very efficient with your time and very intentional with what you're doing.
I mean, to even, get that into, or make it a habit, I guess, it requires a lot of discipline. So that's something that's very hard for people, right? To take that discipline and make yourself do it. Talk about a little bit about like what's, for me, I'm on the phones probably 40 to 60% of my day every day. And that's with buyers and sellers and putting out fires and all kinds of stuff, right?
Oh, but, yeah, same.
So for me, I like block that in, but it's not, I use a Panda planner and mine is basically like priorities on this side, my top 5, and then on my time blocks here, right? And then like menial tasks down here. And so I take the biggest priorities and those are like from weekly goals. But like, how do you do it? Or what does your like block for the day look like? Because I typically have 3 things I try to accomplish.
Yeah, let me pull it up right now, actually. I'll pull up my daily like time blocks. So I only have one more block left because it's 1 o'clock Pacific. So like I started the day really early today. So like for an example, like to finish out my day, and this is like with all the scheduled stuff, I have to spend time to plan my day tomorrow, which I can get into, which is like life-changing. And then I have like probably 20 minutes of phone calls that I need to return. I got to call a couple agents up and make a couple offers, things like that. And I got to spend 30 minutes working on this Facebook ad campaign I'm working with Frank Kern's training. And then I have 20 minutes I got to spend working on a lead magnet, which is more for internet marketing business, but 20 minutes dedicated to working on that lead magnet. That will make me money eventually once I start selling stuff. And then working the last 30 minutes of that time block, hope I'm not too confusing, is working specifically on selling 2 properties that I have under contract in Iowa that I've never been there. So I need to like figure out how to sell those. So all those activities are going to lead to my goal, right, of hitting a specific income goal for the year. So it's not like I'm just doing that for no reason. So that's kind of how the structure is. It doesn't have to just be like work on a marketing business for 30 minutes. It could be like the time block of 2 hours will consist of probably an hour's worth of real estate stuff and then maybe an hour's worth of my podcast/marketing businesses stuff. So it just allows you to be very, very efficient and quick with your time. And then at the end of the day, you're like, oh my God, I got all this stuff done. And then when you kind of, synthesize all this into like projects and stuff that I have that I'm like working on, you can like get projects done so much faster because every day you're spending like 30 minutes of concentrated work, like day over day over day over week over week. You can build some crazy stuff, because you're just working so efficiently.
Yeah, that's amazing. That focus right there is a real game changer for pretty much anybody, but real estate as well. Greg, let's get a little bit tactical here. And let's talk about now, I've seen the videos that you're putting out and they've just been excellent. They've been some primers to what you do in real estate, some primers to lead generation, some primers into things that are like things that you do different in the marketing and sales process. But just talk about like, I know you're doing a lot of mail and then some cold calling, but let's talk about a little bit what you're doing now specifically in the age of virtual wholesaling.
Yeah, love it. So what I'll tell you what I'm doing right now, and then I'll tell you what I did that worked so ridiculously good 2 years ago, but it shows you that the market changes. So right now I'm doing a ton of direct mail, like 13,000 plus units are going out every month. I'm specifically targeting cities that are not saturated. So I'm not going into Tampa Bay, Florida. I'm not going into Phoenix. I'm not going into, Dallas or anything like that. I'm going into like where I'm from, Orange County, New York, kind of hillbilly, got one tooth kind of, area, going into like, Midwest cities, going into like Scranton, Pennsylvania. So I'm hitting areas that are not flooded with other investors. So I get a really good response rate. I'm doing postcards and I'm testing some different letters out. I don't have the results back to kind of give you some data on that. So I'm sending direct mail out to non-saturated areas and I'm seeing about a 1% response, 1 to 2% response rate, depending on where I'm at. And from a KPI perspective, I'm about 35 leads to contract on direct mail. That's like kind of trailing over over the last like couple years. So it's pretty solid, leads to contract. I'd like to get that down. Honestly, I think it may start going down if I start hitting these Midwest cities harder, assuming they convert. And then I'm trying to think of some other stuff like from some stuff that maybe some mistakes I've made on direct mail. So here's a good one. So here's a mistake I just learned. It cost me $1,000. So you guys can listen to this for free and not make it. So I'm big into like writing copy and stuff. So I've been testing a lot of mail pieces out. And I made this postcard up, and it was like basically like trying to like go negative on the postcard, versus like just having them call to be interested. And on the back of the postcard, I wrote, "If you want top dollar for your house, don't call this postcard." And then I wrote a sales letter, and I got 0 phone calls. So I threw like it was like $950 or whatever. So don't do that. Don't do that.
Hey, that's still a really cool test. One of the points, one of the gold nuggets that I want you guys to get out of that right there is how specific Greg is measuring a few KPIs. So it was really the response rate that he was measuring on the direct mail piece, and then he was also measuring leads to contract. So that one right there, you're not going to be able to get it off of one campaign or 2 campaigns or even one mailing, but he knows that number. And so then he can measure over time, and that really will expand your eyes to the power of different marketing tactics. Greg, you're super deep in it going into your own copy. I'm not even certain that I've heard of another real estate investor in our circle writing their own copy. And I know you're a huge student of marketing. So talk a little bit about, what you're aiming to achieve, maybe that the other pieces aren't.
Yeah. So with the copy, like I said, I've tested a couple. I've really only been going like real deep with the copy as of the last like month and a half. But I've really just been testing, the sales letter versus the postcard. And then really it's the type of responses that I want to get. And I want to see if one cause will lead to one effect and then vice versa on a split test. So like an example would be, I have a sales letter I wrote. It's very straightforward. It's very, as Dan Kennedy would say, not a lot of resistance. It's very transparent. And then in the sales letter, it will say there's a little damaging admission copy saying like, hey, if it's kind of subtle, but it's like, hey, if you really want top market value, probably wouldn't be the best fit. We'd offer these other things of value. And then I go back into the sales letter saying how I can help them, et cetera. So I'm like really big into like seeing if that type of copy will get me maybe less phone calls, but better phone calls yet when they kind of, they read my letter and they're like, hey, I kind of get where you're coming from here. Like this is kind of a situation I think I might be able to get value from. So an example being, I sent out a postcard with like a palm tree on it. And, I live here in San Diego. I think the guy called me was over in New York. So no palm trees anywhere near New York, unless you're in like, some strip club in the city or something. But anyway, so he called me and he was like, hey, like this postcard was interesting. I got all these other ones, but yours seemed interesting because he had these palm trees on here and it kind of stood out. So I was like, oh crap. Like, I guess that kind of worked a little bit. So I just want to really see if like testing the copy will, number one, get me the ROI that I want on my direct response. And then number two, is it really going to be like a way where I can get better quality phone calls to where we can get into the sales process, which we'll cover in a minute. So I don't have to do all that heavy lifting on the front end and all this, a lot of kind of, I wouldn't say grunt work, but a lot of qualifying, right? I want people to call me and already have a reasonable expectation on how I can serve them. And if they don't think it's a fit, I'd rather have them not call me so I don't have to put them in my dead lead bucket. I could just have them never call me,
Yeah, absolutely. There's another gold nugget that he just said in the last this little segment, and then the one before. The one before was he talked about putting in a little line that said, if you're looking for full retail price, we're probably not the best fit for you. Most everyone that I know would be afraid to put that on their piece or in their message because they're afraid they would turn someone off. But that's one of the things I learned when I came to the course with John is that, you need to put those pre-qualifiers out there. It'll actually increase your conversion. The second thing, I totally lost my train of thought of where I was going to go with that. Talk to me a little bit. You said you go into small cities, Greg. Yeah. Are you, how do you go about finding buyers there, and how do you know that there's sufficient demand to wholesale properties in those cities?
Okay. That's a great question because I'm in the middle of finding I'm like a seller's first, then buyer's kind of guy. So right now I'm in the middle of trying to sell these properties. So the way I've been trying to find buyers was I'm using PropStream and I'm looking at like cash sales, and like in all those cities, there's tons of them, like legitimate cash transactions. 123 LLC bought Apple Street for $45,000. So like I know there's cash activity there in terms of like demand. In terms of building a list, I will use PropStream. I will cold call buyers. That has worked for me for sure. And then another way that I'll do is I'll just put out I'll put out ads on like Facebook Marketplace in those cities and on Craigslist, and they'll just be like, hey, and if I have a property, I'll do this. Like I have a property, 3-bed, 2-bath in this neighborhood. I try to always price it really, really cheap. Obviously, I have to get it cheaper to make a good spread there, but I'm just trying to kind of put out properties how I normally do it because I do this in my main market. I just put them on Craigslist, put them on Facebook Marketplace. So PropStream, and then what's it called? Using like Craigslist to just put out a generic ad. But like when I say small cities, like it's not like, population 10,000. I'm talking like Scranton, Pennsylvania, which has a reasonable economy there, but it's not like it's, Philadelphia, right? But it's not like it's like the Mennonite country where, got a horse and buggy going down the street. So, and I'm sure there's probably still deals there, by the way. I just haven't tested it.
Yeah, that's not too far away from where I live, actually. Like York and 45 minutes north of here, Amish country second into.
Yeah, man. There's a lot of I know people over in that market. And they crush it up there. They crush it up in that market, and it's like those are smaller areas, but man, there's deals everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. So right now, your main marketing channel is direct mail. So definitely. Talk about when you get a call back in. My process with outbound calls is always prospecting, finding out if it's a lead, right, and finding out light information, and then passing it off to one of the lead managers who then qualifies it and goes through the 4 pillars of motivation. So we can really read into the level of pain that they're feeling and the level of motivation that they might have. Talk about a little bit about your process when a call comes in. How are you quickly cutting through the tire kickers while not getting rid of the gold nuggets in there?
Yeah, love that question. That's so important for people, especially when they're doing virtual stuff. I really kind of get into number one, the first question I love asking, especially even with direct mail, you will get this. You get a lot of interested people, right? And a question I love saying is, hey, listen, I got to ask you this question, John. Before you got my postcard, did you have any intention on selling? Or are you just calling this postcard to see what this is all about? And that gets them, it stops them right in their tracks and makes their brain realize like, okay, am I a liar or am I a truth teller? And the people who are like, oh, I was just curious to, blah, blah, blah. I try to like subtly disqualify them, but I don't want to like turn them off because I've done that before. So that's a mistake I've made. I'm just like, hey, listen, totally get it, man. It sounds like, you really had no plans on selling this before, you got my postcard. I'd be happy to make you an offer. Trust me. I was the one who sent you the card. I always acknowledge the obvious. Obviously, I sent you the card. I clearly would like to buy your house, but it sounds like really you didn't have any plans on selling it. So I'm not sure if even a cash offer would benefit you that much. And I'm pulling back a little bit. A lot of times maybe they're lying. They're like, oh, well, no, I do kind of want to sell. And then all of a sudden, oh, that's great. It sounds like, you might have said that for a reason. And then all of a sudden we're getting into our sales process. So I use that one question before you got my marketing piece, text, call, postcard. Did you have any intention on selling? That'll get them real honest. And then once I have them down the funnel, I like to just be like, find out why they're selling, how long have they owned the property, the condition of the property. And really that's kind of what I do. And a lot of times once I go through those questions with them, they'll start telling me like, oh, it's been vacant for 2 years, or, oh my God, my tenants haven't paid. I just evicted them. That's a big common one I see in the Midwest, a lot of terrible tenants, which is getting me scared to carry rentals. But, so those are like kind of how I kind of do it. And then the big takeaway for people, like if you really want to get good at finding out their pain, like without asking like an awkward question you think might get you in trouble, is like anytime they say something and you're not like clear on what they meant, you just literally go back to them and say, hey, when you say like sick of this house, what do you mean by sick of this house? And then all of a sudden they're going to like expand on what they said. And, oh, well, the tenant just threw up everywhere and there's, cement in the toilet. And now, see where I'm going here. So I'd like to take what they say and repeat it back to them and then get them to expand on it again. And then we can just keep going down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the impact question. When you say blank, what did you really mean by that? Or, the one that I get most often is they'll say, well, yeah, I'd sell it for the right offer. And I'll say, when you say right offer, what'd you mean by that? Do you have a number in mind? Very much.
I love that. Yeah. What's the right offer? What's the right offer to you,
Yeah,
or, I love that. Or I'll shift them to an owner finance. I'll say, oh, I'll give you 100,000 for the house. I'll give you, 10 grand down and 1,000 a month, so I'm just like, I'm trying to structure a deal no matter what. So yeah, no, that's a great question for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's good. You've told us your basic information like that. How long do you think it takes when you're on the phone? I know you're like a sales assassin on the phone, man. When you're on the phone, just say, it's an inbound lead on a postcard. how long do you think it takes until that bell in your head goes ding, ding, ding? This is a real lead. This is a real
Oh,
opportunity.
yeah. 5 minutes, 5 or 10 minutes. I can just smell it, and like, I can give you an example. I got one the other day. The guy called, vacant house, dirt floors in the middle of nowhere,
Ooh.
Major pain, not sort of major pain. Doesn't have like an email, and I just smelled like a deal. Same with the other ones too. Like, another one, inherited property, lives in Virginia, properties in New York, hasn't been inside there in years, needs a ton of work. A lot of it has to do with the condition of the property. From what I've seen, at least in my areas, like the condition is a real, impact. Like it's a real factor. I think I've done maybe like 3 or 4 deals where like they were perfectly fine, but for some reason the seller was in a jam. I don't like those leads as much as the ones where the houses are shot, because usually that leads with more emotional baggage. And next thing you know, we're like, a therapist, which, I don't mind doing, but, that takes up a lot of time. It really does.
Yeah, definitely. So how many phone calls, since you've been virtual, how many phone calls do you think it normally takes you, like just on average, to get to the point of the offer and then discussing them accepting or the contract?
Yeah. 1 to 2. I try not to do it on the first call. I mean that, because then if it's there, it's there. But I really will stress test it. I like 2, and the reason I'm telling you 2 is because at the end of 1, I want their price, and then at the end of 2, we already have a clear agenda on, hey, when we call you back, this is exactly what's going to happen. I want to make sure you're comfortable with that. So I would say about 2 telephone calls with a qualified lead. Unqualified lead, who knows? Usually it's 1, and then we follow up.
Yeah, absolutely. That's beautiful. That's another point right there, guys, that I think is super, super important that I've learned the power of in the past 6 months. And that is not going for, a wedding on the first date, not trying to get that contract on the very first call, getting the price, getting their terms, getting the condition.
Yes.
That's one thing. But you don't need to feel like you need to throw out your price or your offer right away. It builds a lot of rapport. When you say, here's what I'm going to do, I'm going to go talk. My thing is, I'm going to go speak with my partner about the numbers. And sometimes it surprises me what she likes and what she doesn't like. Mr. Seller, if I can't get your number here, should I even call you back?
I love that question. That's basically saying, are you negotiable? I love that question.
Dude, exactly. Like yesterday I had one person who was like drawing their line in the sand, saying 75, that's it. If you don't want it, no problem. I'll hold on to it. And I got to the end and I just said, Mr. Seller, blah, blah, blah. If I can't get you 75, should I even call you back? And sounded super fearful to him. And he goes, yeah, call me back either way, man. Call me back. I want to talk to you. And I was like, okay.
If I can't get you 75, should I even call you back? Oh, I learned that one from the batch skip tracing guy, Jesse. He told me about that one. And,
Jesse did. Okay.
Wow. Yeah. And I was like, Jesus, man, that's a great line. Oh yeah,
absolutely. Talk a little bit about the when you're asking certain questions on the phone. I want to hear how you ask them, because I think this is tactical. I don't want to say that I'm a natural on the phone, but I love talking on the phone. I don't mind cold calling whatsoever. I don't mind calling anyone, asking them how much they owe on the property, though I don't just say how much do you owe. But I found that the way that I ask questions now, and it's been very well crafted from John, from you, from a lot of different people now. That's very important. The order of operations, but also how you ask the question is very important. So could we just pick your brain on a few of those like important questions and how you ask?
Yeah. So like the first, like the first question is like the why you're selling question. I always like to just be very surprised on why they're selling me their house, even if it's violently obvious, like inherited property. Like, instead of being like, if you, like, for example, if they inherited their house and they're calling you, you don't need to be like, oh, well, why are you selling your house? Because it's so obvious you're going to kill rapport that way. But I always say, man, you inherited this property, great area. I mean, you don't want to just try to keep it yourself, so that's going to lead to them telling they don't want to do that, and then I'm approaching a deal killer. So I try not to make it too obvious, but at the same time, when it's, when I really don't know why they're selling, i.e. they've never told me they inherited it, whatever the case is, I'm just like, I always make a comment about either the house or the area, depending on what is worse. If the area is terrible, I use the house. If the house is terrible, I'm like, man, properties in Baltimore, I mean, you see that market recently, it's blowing up. Why are you selling now? And then when you're doing that, like, you're acting surprised, and then they start almost trying to sell you on why they need to sell the house. Another question, I was just we were working with a client today, and I was like, you got to ask this question next time because it's going to help you a lot. And I say, hey, if for some reason I can't buy the house, we're not a fit for some reason. If that's the case, that's fine. Always want to do if you can't buy it, that's cool. But if I can't buy it, I mean, well, what are your plans with this thing? What are you going to do with this property? What that does is that question tells you what the biggest objection is going to be. Oh, I'm going to list it with an agent. Okay, that might be a retail seller. Oh, I'm going to keep it. Well, they might have been doing that the whole time. Or I'm going to call, the other postcard that mailed me. Well, now, you're going to be with an investor. So how do I, out position the other investor and try to add value and win that over the other guy? Or they're going to say, this doesn't happen every time, but when it does happen, it's good news for you. They're like, well, I don't know. I was hoping you'd be able to help me out here. And now all of a sudden, you're not guaranteed to get that sale, but you're in a situation where they're really assigning a lot of value to what you have to offer. So, hey, if you don't sell to me, what are your plans with the house? Is a great question. And then I said it earlier today, and this one, this is if you could write this down, this really helps a lot. It's whenever they mention something like I can't deal with these stairs. I can't deal with when you say blank, whatever blank is, what do you mean? You get them to expand on that, and then they're going to talk themselves into the motivation versus you saying how are these stairs impacting you? That'll work, right? But you're going to get better results from saying, hey, when you say you're sick of the stairs, what do you mean by that? I'm sick of the stairs and then that's a natural human behavior. They're going to start to expand on that because it's a logical question for them to answer, but that is going to get them to emotionally explain why they want to sell the property.
Absolutely, man. Those are pure.
All right, I've got, yeah.
No, those are pure gold. I love those questions too, is because you're asking them a very direct question, but the response that you're getting gauges something correlated, but totally different. So when you're asking them when you say blank, what exactly do you mean by that? You're getting their biggest motivator. I mean, I never even correlated those two and put that together. That is so beautiful right there, Greg. I love that. Thank you for sharing.
It's a logical way for them to express emotion. Because if it's almost like it's like a circuit. Like if you emotionally try to ask them and they don't receive your question, there's going to be a lot of barriers for them to reply. Like this sounds like sciencey. Trust me, I'm not this smart. It's just I've been studying sales for a while. But if you logically explain to them why you want to know why they're selling, they're going to receive that extremely well. And they're going to give you an emotional answer because there's no resistance whatsoever. If that makes sense. So if you ever ask a seller, does that make, you know what I mean? You have to think about how they're going to receive the actual question you're asking them. You have to
absolutely. That's so beautiful right there. Okay, man, that's awesome. What was the other question I was going to ask you? So when you're presenting the offer, talk about the 60-second version of how you're presenting that offer. So when I'm out there gauging, what I'm doing is once we get the 4 pillars of motivation, I'm going and I'm looking on the MLS at really what's sold in a radius. And I'm saying, here's what's sold as I'm reading off the numbers, 42, 61, 79. So Mr. Seller, is that kind of the range you expected, 41 to 79, somewhere in there? And, they'll throw me a range. We'll further qualify a little bit more and I'll shrink that range. By the time we come to the offer, I'm at a very small range, but I'm still a range. What do you do for how you present? I'm super interested to hear.
So with the offers, it's all different with the sellers, but I love to get a number out of them first. I don't care if they want $1 gazillion for the house. I want to know where they're at because quick little rabbit hole here. I did that on a house one time and the guy told me what his asking price was and it was like 30 grand below my initial offer. And it was a home run. It was a home run deal, right? So if he didn't tell me what he wanted, I would have, left 30 grand on the table. So I like to see where they're at first. And then, so step number 1, find out what they want for the property. And then step number 2 is if their asking price isn't too far away from my real offer, I shift from, negotiating, haggling, I shift away from that and I get concentrated more on what is their ability to take action. Hey, besides you, who else is involved in this decision? If you got a good number, what do the next steps look like? I love that question. Hey, if you got a great number that you were happy with, what do the next steps look like from here? And then they're going to tell me what their next steps are. And if it's I got to get, the attorney general involved. Well, now I know we have all these barriers. So no matter what price I give them, there's all these objections I still have to deal with. So I like to kind of figure out what does their next steps look like if they got a great offer. And then let's say we're not too far off in a negotiation. They want 60, I can pay 45. Well, then I would start, do the, hey, listen, what's the best you can do, and then usually they'll negotiate against themselves. And then what I try to do is I try to kind of summarize all of their pain and then say, if I can help you, really with your situation here with your tenant not paying rent and helping you get down to Florida, would that, would you be able to kind of work with me a little bit more on price if I can help you with these other things? And I'm doing that because I'm trying to get them off of the money and onto the other things of value. To then when we slide in with a lower price, they like it more because I'm helping them with the other problems they told me I can help them solve, if that makes sense. And then from there, it's just like, hey, we're at 47, you're at 55, and usually, if we're that close, I can either buy it and rent it or whatever, wholesale it. And if they're really far off in price, like if they're at 100 and I'm at 50, usually if that's the case, they're going to list their house or they're keeping it or they're not serious. They're usually eliminated at that point if they're still that far off.
Yeah.
So I hope that answered your question there. That was
Oh yeah, definitely, man. That was awesome. So just 2 more questions and we're wrapping up here, but it sounds like I know from experience what you and John teach, but from everyone else who maybe hasn't had that exposure yet, how is the sales process different with you versus what someone might have, coming in, which in my experience is a lack of a sales process. But what's the difference that you and John teach? Because it's phenomenal.
Yeah. So I think the big difference is, that's a great question. It's just using like like looking at sales as from a system perspective instead of just like pulling it out of your what perspective. So like basically when you learn a sales system, you let the system do the selling and you just got to know how to work the system. So an example of that would be like when you get a deal, you're going to know why you got the deal because all the parts of the system were in alignment to get the transaction. And then if you didn't get a deal, assuming you followed the system, which is very important, you're going to know why you didn't get the deal. Oh, well, there wasn't enough motivation. The deal killer was they're going to list their house. They're a retail seller. I don't do retail deals. Therefore, I don't feel bad that I didn't close that deal because the goal is to close every closable deal, not to close every lead that comes in because that would be insane, So just having a system that's simple and then being able to follow that system and then have other people, if you have a team, duplicate that system for you to the best of their abilities.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. That's really cool. Okay, we give everyone one mindset shift or one macro kind of thing that has benefited you that could benefit them directly in either lead gen or sales.
Test your marketing. If you don't test your marketing, you're in trouble. I like marketing even more than sales, honestly. And I'm the sales guy saying that just because it's so fascinating with numbers and spending a certain money on marketing and getting a return on that money. It's crazy. So you got to be willing to test because when you get really good at testing, you're going to know what works and what doesn't work based on data, not based off you thinking it doesn't work. So be comfortable with testing, be okay with losing some money in the short term, because once you really get good at testing direct response marketing, you don't even need to be in real estate. You could get in another business and just start generating leads and you know what I mean? So it's I think learning that skill of lead generation, no matter what market or no matter what business you're in, it's like a lifetime insurance policy to always be able to make money. Because if you can get the leads coming in, it's a numbers game. It's if we were in any other business, assuming we were students of marketing, we would all be fine because we know how to get traffic, convert that traffic, turn that into cash, and then rinse and repeat. So it's that is such a critical skill and a big way to get good at that. And I'm not even I'm still getting better every day. I'm no expert, I'm just learning myself and making mistakes, but testing and not being scared to try something to see if it was going to work or not is how I've been able to virtually wholesale, do stuff in Texas. That was all from a test. I was tested this one strategy of calling vacant houses when there was no vacant house feeds out there. And there was no competition. And I was, it was shooting fish in a barrel, but that was from a test. The postcard campaigns in the Midwest with getting 2 contracts in 2 days from a test. It's all from testing. And it's powerful. So just don't be afraid to test. And especially with texting and stuff, when you're doing media that's cheaper than mail, test a different script, test a different, it's funny you say that because I do text blasting and I did a campaign and I was hey, I'm not offering you top dollar for your house. I'd offer you a fair cash price. That's something you consider. Dude, I was getting better responses from that text than the general, hey, I want to buy your house. I actually got a deal today off of that campaign. Wow. So that was from a test,
Get out.
So yeah, don't be afraid to test. Hope
That's
I didn't beat
amazing.
that.
Greg, we went over the time. Thank you so much for your time, man. That was just an
Oh,
absolute master class in sales and virtual, some aspects of virtual wholesaling. Tell everybody where they can find you to learn more, because guys, Greg's put a lot of content out there, and as you can see, he's just a wealth of knowledge.
Hey, thank you. Yeah, if you want to follow me, I would say 2 ways is Instagram, Grego_37. You can check me out there. I'm gonna actually put another video out after we're done with this. And then another way is my show, Pave the Way Podcast. I'm really revamping that thing, and I'm going to start growing that thing to be a big old podcast because I didn't treat it as a business originally. I was just kind of messing around with it. So I'm revamping that whole thing now. So we got tons of content coming out. So listen to the podcast, follow me on Instagram. And yeah, any way I can help anyone, it would be greatly appreciated, especially during these times. There's a lot of uncertainty. I think everyone's a little frightened, including myself. No one really knows what's going to happen with this virus. So trying to put out more valuable content that can be consumed by people and can really genuinely help them, whether they're in business or whether they're new to business and they want to get started and they want to focus on the right things, learn from my mistakes. Happy to help any way I can.
Dude, I love that. Thank you so much for being a go-giver, man. That's really important in our world, as you can tell, guys. Greg is definitely a go-giver. Greg, go out there and kill it, brother. Keep in touch, man.
Thanks, man.
Hey, guys, thanks so much. Underground is over, and this elevator is going up. See you next time.